It's now my pleasure to introduce to you 6 extraordinary people who've had a vital role in bringing this film into being. Remember that you're invited to ask questions of our panel using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. And we hope you will have some questions for our group. I want to begin by introducing the panel. First, Andre Costantini, the director of the film. Andre is a filmmaker based in New York whose credits include several short films, documentaries, and award-winning comedy films, as well as industrial and commercial work. In 2008, he was commissioned by an organization called Doc to Doc, which is an NGO and part of the Clinton Global Initiative, to produce a series of short films in Africa on the organization's work providing much-needed medical supplies with a focus on maternal health care. Andre directed his first documentary feature film in 2012 about Brazilian artist Bel Borba. When he's not making films, Andre teaches film and photography at various professional schools around the country. Vanessa Reiser is also a filmmaker and Andre's longtime professional partner and collaborator. She's a video producer and editor as well, who's based here in Austin, where she lives with her 2 daughters. A graduate of New York University's prestigious film school, Vanessa began her career in filmmaking in New York, where she lived and worked for 15 years before moving back to Texas, which is her childhood home. A talented digital storyteller, Vanessa's passion is creating compelling documentary stories that capture the essential beauty of the human experience. Dr. Dan Stultz, who opened the film, is a native Texan who lives with Parkinson's disease, having been diagnosed in 2007. Dan practiced internal medicine for 28 years in San Angelo, Texas, and then served as CEO of the Shannon Health System from 1999 to 2006, and then as CEO of the Texas Hospital Association from 2006 to 2014. He then joined the faculty of the Texas A&M University Health Sciences Center, where he taught until 2017. Dan and his wife Alice are proud parents to 3 adult children and have lots of grandchildren. Dr. Elizabeth Peckham is a board-certified neurologist with subspecialty training in movement disorders. She has practiced as a movement disorder specialist for 12 years, and since 2014, when she and her family settled in Austin, Dr. Peckham has been a partner with Central Texas Neurology Consultants located in Round Rock, Texas. Her neurology practice focuses on both clinical treatment and clinical trials involving patients with movement disorders. And in the spirit of full disclosure, Dr. Peckham is Dan's and my doctor, and so as Dan reminded me the other day, we have to be on our best behavior. Lauren Lewis is a certified personal trainer and group fitness instructor with over 30 years experience working with a broad range of clients. In 2013, she joined Power for Parkinsons and has become the organization's lead instructor. Lauren teaches the young onset Parkinson's classes and also the Move and Shout class, which has become PFP's signature class, and it's viewed and enjoyed globally through YouTube on a weekly basis. As I know personally, Lauren is quite capable of inflicting pain on you that has health benefits while never ceasing to smile. Dr. Nina Mosier is a retired internist with a special interest in geriatric medicine. She's also president and the co-founder with Susan Stahl of Power for Parkinsons, which she will tell you more about later. After practicing medicine in Chicago and Austin for many years, Nina found her passion for helping improve the lives of people with Parkinson's disease. Both Nina and Susan were well acquainted with Parkinson's due to their fathers having the disease, and their vision and partnership have led them to create Power for Parkinsons, which they did in 2013. And I speak from experience in saying it's truly an extraordinary organization. And finally, again, I'm Alan Cole. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's in the fall of 2016 at the age of 48. I'm proud to serve on the board of Power for Parkinsons, to be a faculty member and an administrator in the Steve Hicks School of Social Work at the University of Texas at Austin. And I also created and I curate a blog called PD Wise, which is a hub for sharing stories and experiences as well as for building community that's related to life with Parkinson's disease. So let's get started. I'm going to ask Andre and Vanessa the first couple of questions. And again, remember to ask your questions in the Q&A function. So Andre, let's begin with you as the director of this film. Talk about your process for approaching the production of the documentary, and especially how your vision for the film came together.
Well, in August of last year, I was approached by a longtime friend of mine who was newly appointed programming director at Connecticut PBS to produce a film on Parkinson's disease. And so that's where it started. And we've been trying to work together for a number of years, and finally it came together that this was a project that it seemed like would be perfect. Now, there was a caveat, however, and he came to me with this thing saying, well, I really want you to do this project, submit a proposal, but we're going to need it in about 12 weeks, which is a very short period of time to come up with the entire film when you're starting with basically nothing. You have an idea about what you want to do. So the first thing, of course, is you research as much as you can, because I had little relationship in my life personally with Parkinson's before the film. I do have one relative who has Parkinson's disease, and he's actually in the film for I think 2 shots. He walks down the hall just before part of Alan, I believe you're talking that part of the film. And, again, with filmmaking, you have to interview a bunch of people, and some of them, for whatever narrative reasons and time constraints you don't use, but we got a little bit of him in there. In any case, so I digress. But what happened is it became a very short lead time to be able to create an entire film and to try to illustrate the film with characters and people that were telling their stories. In fact, the name of the film didn't even happen until the end. What we did know is that we wanted to focus on several different things. We wanted to focus on people that were doing treatments that were helping improve their lives, and that were proactive about their disease. And so it became difficult in the beginning, but I contacted Vanessa right away, as you mentioned before, Alan, longtime collaborator. And so, I explained the project to her, and, we tried to put our heads together and sort of combine resources. And the one thing I will say, and then, you can continue on with the questions. I could probably go on for a couple of hours talking about this, but is that the one thing about it is that talking to people is the best part about understanding anything, and especially Parkinson's, because all of a sudden I talked to Vanessa, and then Vanessa talked to someone, and and again, the degrees of separation with as many people that share this disease is pretty close. So everyone, if they talk about it, will probably know somebody, or at the very least, somebody who knows somebody. And so then you can start to discuss it in a real way. And it was the first week of September. I have a daughter who just turned 5, and she was starting her first year at pre-K, and she had a friend of hers that she went to nursery school with that was in her class. And she's like, oh, can I invite my friend over after the first day of school? And her father was there. I mean, I had sort of seen him before. I didn't know. I said, sure, come on over. Turns out this guy was a Grammy Award winning musician. And I mentioned something to him about that I'm doing this film on Parkinson's. He says, well, I was just touring with Bobby McFerrin, and Bobby McFerrin has Parkinson's. Did you know that? And so, again, the more that you just talk about it, and then from there, I wound up finding the singing group, because the woman who was the choir director in the Parkins Singers in Philadelphia was the person who used to be help Bobby McFerrin with his vocal exercises when he found out that he had Parkinson's. So again, the degrees of separation are very small. You just have to communicate, talk, and have an open mind.
Yeah, it's uncanny as you reflect on the few degrees of separation and Vanessa and my connection and some others. It's just quite uncanny. So I echo that. Vanessa, tell us about your role in the production, and especially as an editor. How did you land on the arc of the film? I assume there are lots of different ways you could go, but how did you end up where you did?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When you're going into making a documentary, there's a lot to think about, and you don't always go into it with a plan for how the film is going to come together and be structured. So you start making it and you do interviews, and you, as it's happening, things become clear as to how it might come together. And I think for us, what was extraordinary, Alan, was Andre had filmed you running the marathon and then went to Colorado. Is that the order that it happened in? And interviewed the gentleman you saw in the film, who was using the metaphor of running a marathon and comparing it to living with Parkinson's and fighting Parkinson's. And so right then we knew this is how this is meant to be. I mean, so we knew that we were going to be working toward ending the film with you finishing the marathon. And it's just how it happens sometimes. It comes together organically like that. And we couldn't have scripted that. We had no idea that would happen. So that was pretty fortunate for us.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Dan, talk a little bit about what it's like to live with Parkinson's. You did some of that in the film, but for folks who aren't as familiar, what's it like to have Parkinson's disease?
Well, every day is a new day. You know, you start out wondering about the tumor, and then a year later you're worried about something else, and a year after that you're worried about medicine. So it's a changing game. For me now, 14 years into it, what's it like? I still have a lot of stiffness and some balance problems, but overall my mind is intact, I think, and I'm able to do what I want to do, but I have some limits. I'd say I'm at 75%. I don't know if Dr. Peckham would back me up on that, but I'm probably at 70 to 80%. I still run a chainsaw, still have my tractor work moving rocks and dirt, but I'm not quite as efficient as I used to be. But other than that, it seems like things are much the same. My significance is that it happened after deep brain stimulation surgery. I don't think I would be doing all that without DBS, as Vanessa witnessed when she was out at our place filming.
Yeah, Vanessa talked a lot.
Yeah, sorry, I have to cut in because that was one of the most extraordinary moments I'd ever experienced as a filmmaker, Dan, and I was so grateful to you for being vulnerable in that way and putting yourself in that position. I remember we were setting it up, and I was like, so how often do you turn this thing off? And Dan, you said, oh, I've never turned it off. And I was just like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? I was there with my videographer, Sally, and we got a chair for you to sit in, Dan, and it was not a really big chair, and you turned it off and started tremoring, and we were terrified and not knowing what was going to happen. And so you finished and you turned it back on, and then you asked us if we wanted you to do the other side. Do you remember that? We were like, no, we got it. We were just happy that you've seen enough. Yeah. But yeah, that was extraordinary. And again, having that, back to the first question you asked, Alan, about the structure of the film, it was just obvious to us that was such a dramatic way to open the film, showing how incredible this medical device was. And you can tell right away that it's life-changing. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that. That was amazing.
Did you get Dan on one take? That's my question.
Oh yeah, no, we weren't going to do another take. We were like,
okay.
This is it.
All right, that's good. Thank you. Dr. Peckham, talk a little bit about how Parkinson's is treated and what's most challenging in treating and or managing the disease.
Well, as the video said, if you've seen one patient with Parkinson's, you've seen one patient. There's a whole list of different issues that can come up with Parkinson's, and we've talked a lot about the tremor and the balance, speech, cognition, constipation, and the list goes on. So I think one of the challenging things is trying to adapt and individualize the treatment. Every patient is different. It's important to find out what bothers them and to go after that. And it's always interesting because some patients come in with a pretty advanced tremor, but that's not what's bothering them. Or maybe somebody comes in and their hand is barely shaking, and that's a big thing. So I think trying to individualize treatment is important. I think the most challenging aspect of Parkinson's is the cognitive aspect that can affect a lot of patients. Oftentimes, they're more sensitive to the side effect of the medications that are available to treat the motor symptoms. We do have some medications that treat cognition, but most are looking at neuroprotection and slowing progression rather than truly making cognition better. So that's a challenge, but there are clinical trials going on with that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Lauren, talk more about exercise in Parkinson's. We know that it's the drug of choice for most of us and certainly for our physicians. But talk about your program at Power for Parkinson's and what makes it particularly distinctive for helping to manage this disease.
Well, kind of what everybody's discussed already, exercise is, as you said, the drug of choice. What makes our program just a little different than other programs that are out there is we are symptom directed as opposed to muscle directed. So we address the symptoms, the most common symptoms of Parkinson's. We're inclusive. We include anyone regardless of what progression of the disease you're in or your fitness level. Everyone is invited and can participate, and we modify and alter different exercises according to your level, so everyone gets to be challenged and work at their level and feel part of the program. Our classes are all taught by our certified instructors, and we use volunteers to help assist for safety and balance so that, you can always stay at your level and not be fearful of safety issues. We include a cognitive element in all of our classes also, which is so important, as Dr. Peckham said. So we keep the brain, we work on memory and focus and full brain function. And we offer a lot of social opportunities because that's another symptom of Parkinson's disease that no one thinks about, but loneliness, depression. So we offer a lot of social opportunities as well. And this is my favorite part of it. It's free. All of our classes are free for anyone with Parkinson's disease and their caregiver.
Yeah, it's really important.
Special.
Thank you. Nina, talk a little more about Power for Parkinson's, how you and Susan envisioned the organization evolving and where it's come from, where it began.
Well, we started everything in 2013, and because of our experience with our fathers, I mean, we realized that there was a lack of services for people with Parkinson's, and we did know how important exercise was. So we just started with 3 locations, about 30 people, and the program has just grown dramatically. We had these incredible instructors on board, and a whole team of volunteers to the point that we had 13 free classes at 9 different locations in the Austin area. But what also happened about 6 years ago is that we started pre-recording some of our videos on YouTube. So we developed a global audience, and what's happened now with the quarantine is that what was, a much smaller part of our operation, now we live stream our classes every day, and we are reaching, still able to help people here locally, but we have dramatically increased our global presence. And at the same time, like Lauren had mentioned about the social aspect of our program, which is one of the really truly special parts of our program. We've had to really work hard to keep that going, but we have a chat feature on YouTube, so we still engage people. We have a Zoom dance class, and we hear from people around the world, from Czechoslovakia and Argentina and Israel and all over the US, now that we're live streaming. So it's been a crazy, exciting experience.
Yeah.
And we're glad that we can be part of it.
Yeah. Let's stay with the theme of exercise just for a moment. We have some great questions coming in on the Q&A. Is there an optimum level of physical activity that seems to reduce symptoms the most? Maybe Dr. Peckham and maybe Lauren can each take a try at answering that question. So what do you look for? What do you recommend? I think Dr. Peckham, you mentioned in the film sort of a starting point, but say more about that.
Sure. So I think, as mentioned in the film, I think a starting point is, and the starting point really depends on the individual. I mentioned 30 to 45 minutes of exercise 5 days a week that incorporates aerobics, stretching, and strength training. But I would say, again, it needs to be individualized. So if you have somebody who's done nothing and they've never exercised and maybe they're 80 years old, well, start slow. So 5 minutes, anybody can do something for 5 minutes, walking for 5 minutes, increase your exercise gradually week to week. Don't overdo it, but you want to see a gradual improvement with that. There are many different forms of exercise out there. They all show improvement with Parkinson's. You look at the exercise classes, and Lauren can talk more about the Power for Parkinsons, but there's yoga, Pilates, boxing, swimming, running. Anything is great. I think choose something that you enjoy doing, because I do have patients that tell me that they choose to do yoga, and I ask them, oh, how's it going? Oh, I hate it. Well, pick something that you like, because I think just common sense tells you that's something you're going to stick with. So I think that's really important as well.
Yeah.
I'll let Lauren.
Lauren, anything to add to that?
It's been my experience that most people walk into a class and they hate exercise. Everybody hates exercise. I'm the only person that seems to like exercise. But what I've seen in our classes is that even people that hate it come back more and more and more and begin to like it. And the reason why they like it is because they feel empowered by the exercise. What exercise can do is, again, we go back to the reinforcing the brain. Motions and movements that has been lessened or by the disease can, in fact, and we've seen it in our classes, be strengthened. So, so whether it's speed or gait or or just focusing on remembering a pattern of to do an exercise, all of those can be strengthened through various different forms of exercise. And what the list that Dr. Peckham gave were all, they all involve both sides of the body, crossing the midline, contralateral exercises. So you're using your right and left arm, left leg, together, and then vice versa. Those are all great exercises for Parkinson's, because those are often movements that are lost.
Yeah.
Or diminished.
Yeah. Well, let's move from sort of the Power for Parkinson's program to singing, because I know PFP also has a group of singers, and maybe this question's for Andre and Vanessa. Someone wants to know, how did you connect with the Parkinson's singers in Philadelphia? And then a follow-up for Dr. Peckham, what percentage of people with Parkinson's seem to have vocal cord symptoms or voice issues? So maybe Andre and Vanessa first, how did you connect with the Parkinson's singers?
Well, sort of the story goes back to where I left off almost. That it was my daughter's first day of school, and her friend wanted to come over, and her friend's father was a musician. And I told him what I was doing, and he told me what he was doing, project-wise. We're just having a conversation. Yeah. And then he told me that Bobby McFerrin also has Parkinson's, and that he was touring with him the previous year. And so then I kind of went into sort of a Google search of that. and found the the music from Bobby McFerrin's old church, like the church that he used to go to. And then she also helped him with exercises, one that founded or was the choir director for the Parkinson Singers in Philadelphia. So when I found out about them, and they had posted a couple of videos, which also gave me a little bit of indication of like, where they were at with things in terms of like the number of people and how it sounded and things like this. And it was just a beautiful, compelling thing. I mean, I think music connects people independent of, any disease, but when you layer it with, having something that you're like, there's a reason that you're there. You're doing it for the benefits and for the community and for all the things that it affords to improve the quality of life significantly. And so for me, that was sort of a perfect way to have all those things come together.
Mm-hmm. Great. And PFP has the Powerful Pipes, is that correct? The singing group at Power for Parkinson's, is that correct?
We do.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun. We have the singing group, and we have the two dance classes. So we incorporate a lot of music, and you're right, Andre, it does. It brings people together in such a special way that nothing else can.
Yeah. So Dr. Peckham, on the voice issues, do you have a comment on that?
I know the question was related to what percentage, how many patients. I would say at some point in Parkinson's, most patients will experience some issue with their voice. It does vary again from patient to patient. Certain things may make it worse. DBS, unfortunately, can, just because the electricity can affect the surrounding brain structures and can cause speech issues that are worse after DBS than before. So that's something that can be a factor. I agree with everything everybody else said. I mean, speech therapy is very, very important. There's not only Power for Parkinson's, but there's another group in Texas called the Parkinson's Voice Project, and they're doing live streaming videos as well. And I think those are great. I think they're, with COVID, now everybody's gone to live stream, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of interest in symptoms on the Q&A. Anxiety, a non-motor symptom that's quite common, anxiety and depression. And from what I read, it's 40 to 50, maybe even more percentage of people with Parkinson's at some time will have anxiety and or depression. Can you talk a little bit about that, Dr. Peckham, before we move on from some of the symptoms to some other areas of focus?
Sure. So anxiety is one of the non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's. I've had some patients that, 10, 15 years prior to the tremor or stiffness or slowness, developing anxiety and or depression was a big, big factor in their life. I think there are a lot of ways to treat it, trying to do a combination of medication, therapy, potentially cognitive type therapy, psychotherapy. And if it's really advanced, working with a psychiatrist and working with one that's comfortable with movement disorders, with Parkinson's, is really important.
Yeah. Thank you. Dan, I'm going to come back to you. Can you talk a little bit more about how your experience as a medical doctor and practicing for so many years before becoming an administrator and then ultimately a faculty member, how did that influence or shape your experience of becoming a patient with a chronic illness after having treated so many patients for so many years?
Well, it was a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing in the sense that I was a little bit further along in the educational curve, understood most of the terms, and albeit a little dated. And I had empathy for the patients. It was a curse in that over a total of about 36 years practicing, I had seen too much. I'd seen too much illness, and especially with Parkinson's disease, kind of in the old days when Cinemed was about the only thing available. In fact, I talked to Dr. Peckham about some drugs. She looked at me and she said, "We don't use that anymore." And I said, "Yeah, I know, it was an old drug." But being a clinician and seeing in internal medicine especially, it gets you a little close sometimes to some of the bad things that happen. On the other hand, it gives you a perspective. And that's why I said in the film, if you have hope, all is not lost. That perspective, that clinical perspective helps a little bit, I think, certainly more than it hurts. And looking on the long side, there are people with Parkinson's in the old days, when I started in the early 70s, that didn't do well quickly. Now you don't see that. Patients that get to movement disorders specialists early, they do pretty well for a long time, better than they used to.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's shift for a moment. And I don't know who to ask this question of. Maybe well, let me start with Vanessa. What's your takeaway from this experience as a filmmaker? Something that surprised you about the experience, or troubled you, or stuck with you? I mean, what do you take away from this experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think both Andre and I were really moved by everyone that we had a chance to interview for this project. And it takes a lot of courage to be interviewed on camera about something that's so personal and life-changing. So I think first and foremost, we were really grateful for everyone who took that seat in front of the hotlights and agreed to share their story. And I think I didn't know a lot about Parkinson's disease before going into this project, just like Andre. And so learning about the numbers and how common it is really blew my mind. It's not a disease that we hear about enough, considering how many people have it. So that was pretty informative. And going into any project like this, you know, being a non-medical professional, there's a huge burden to get it right. You know, like this is meant to inform the public and possibly even give them information about their own illness that they don't know. So we took that really seriously. And we really wanted to get it right and use the nuances and the details of everyone's personal journeys to tell a larger story about the disease. Yeah. And that was important for us to accomplish. And I think we did. And but I think the takeaway was getting to meet all these amazing people in my own community here that I didn't know. And so, yeah.
Thank you. Andre, what about you?
When I was out in Colorado, I was speaking to Dr. Lehigh. She said something that I found sort of very interesting, but oddly indicative of every single person that I met in this project. And she's like, for some reason, and I can't explain this to you, only nice people get Parkinson's. So I don't know what that means or why, but every single person on the project at every step of the way was like, these are the people that you would just like in your life because they're just nice, beautiful human beings. And that was across the board. So, you know, I don't know why, how, or whatever. And it just seemed to be something that was indicative. Again, it was something that she told me, you know, not in the film, it didn't make sense for that, but it did inform me about, you know, people in general. And so that was sort of you know, one of the important takeaways. And I also think that, you know, the idea of just sharing information is sort of, again, it echoes what I said before. And in a way, it's a sort of simple and basic, like, oh, just be a human being and talk to somebody. But, you know, I think that there's a stigma, obviously, with certain things, right? If you have like cancer, it's a stigma. If you have this, if you have, you know, some communicable disease, you know, in this day and age, like COVID, like for some people that even might be a stigma, you know, people don't think, of course, they can catch Parkinson's, but they don't know how to react to people, especially if they, you know, are just sort of experiencing this type of thing. And, you know, even I assume, because I had this experience with some of the subjects in the film, like some of them even told me, they're like, I have not told some of my friends that I have Parkinson's, because they were sort of afraid of how it would be received, whether or not people would just, whatever, people react in different ways to these things.
Yeah.
But in no way should it be a stigma, and to see people that just take a proactive role in their lives, especially, in the circumstance, to me is the most beautiful story to tell, because it resonates on a level that is specifically important for people that have Parkinson's, but I think for people in general. And so that was, and it was something that Vanessa and I had talked about, to be able to do that, because, you could do something that is specifically focused on, a clinical thing or this or whatever, but at the same time, if you tell a story that resonates with people in general, and Parkinson's is a part of it, and the characters that there are being proactive and, figuring out a way to deal with it, then to me, that's a successful, way to tell a story.
Yeah.
And I do understand that, yeah, this does not explain everyone's Parkinson's situation. It's only a 27-minute film. There are, like Dr. Peckham said, anxiety, there's lots of other things that were not in the film, of course, but
Right.
At the same time, for me, and having a short period of time to tell the story that I would like to focus on, because I think it's better for everyone, is to connect to the idea of taking what you do, and like the title of the film, ultimately Empowered by Parkinsons. No one wants to be empowered by Parkinson's, but that's not your choice.
Right.
But once that lands on you, then what do you do with it? And I think people doing exceptional things, or being able to navigate their world and having the best quality of life possible, is the best case scenario.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you naming the anxiety, and for many of us, the reluctance to be public with the disease. I know many people who, wait many years in some cases before they tell anybody, or if they tell somebody, it's a partner or a spouse and maybe close family members. And for good reasons, right? I mean, there's a lot of misperceptions about Parkinson's. There's a lot of misinformation about Parkinson's. But it does put one at risk socially and professionally if a person is still, working and that sort of thing. And yet in my case, and I can only speak for myself, but also in conversations with a lot of other people who were silent about it for an extended period of time, months or years, inevitably they feel better once they lift that burden and start living more publicly with their disease. And I think your film invites people to do that in a way that I think we need. It sort of destigmatizes Parkinson's, I hope. It shows that it's not a death sentence, but a rich life can be lived in spite of Parkinson's. And then in some ways, there's a question in the chat for me that Carol in the film also stated that in some ways Parkinson's has its own gifts. It brings people into your life and perspectives into your life that may not have been there otherwise. And while that doesn't mean we would sign up for Parkinson's, it does mean that good things can come out of it, and really vital relationships and authentic sort of sharing of the journey that most of us probably wouldn't have otherwise. And so I like the film for a lot of reasons, but I think one of them is I think you hit both the challenges, but also the giftedness or the opportunities that can come with Parkinson's, which doesn't add up for many people. Probably wouldn't have added up for me either before it became my experience. So thank you for that. Dr. Peckham, we have a lot of medical questions. So I'm going to ask you, talk about the next 5 to 10 years as you see it. People are interested in trials. Where's the smart money on some of those trials? What is if there's reason for hope, where does that lie mainly? Can you talk about that?
Of course. Yeah, so I think there is a lot of hope in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's one thing I wanted to bridge off of with the film. I felt that the film was very hopeful. There's a lot of promise, and that's the same avenue for clinical trials right now. There are certain drugs that are being looked at both to slow and potentially stop progression. There are some that target the protein that gets deposited into the cells that cause the cells that make dopamine to die. So alpha-synuclein is that protein. So there are phase 2 clinical trials right now targeting that. There are several other studies using almost repurposed drugs, some that are antihypertensives, anti-diabetic drugs that are also being looked at to be neuroprotective. There are several drugs in clinical trials that are looking for off treatment, improvement in on time. And previously mentioned off time, we always think about the motor symptoms, but there are a lot of non-motor symptoms. Anxiety can be a major player with off time. There are genetic therapies that are being looked at. So there's a lot going on.
Can you talk a little bit about genetics? That's another question in the
Sure.
in the queue here. You know, how much of Parkinson's is genetic? How much of it is environment? What's the sort of latest consensus on that relationship?
So the consensus right now is that patients with young onset Parkinson's, which is diagnosis before the age, either at or before the age of 50, there's a much higher percentage of genetic component to it, thought up to anywhere between 50-60%. In later stage Parkinson's right now, we think that it's a much lower percentage, 10 to 15%. For example. However, I think those statistics are going to change a lot in the coming years. Before 1997, Parkinson's was deemed non-genetic. They thought it was all environmental. And it's because they saw it in patients who were exposed to environmental toxins. So now we're a little over 20 years into the discovery of genes for Parkinson's. And I think, you know, Parkinson's has been known about for hundreds of years. If you look way back, first described a little over 100 years ago, but we're really in the infancy of genetics. I think it takes a lot of patients participating in clinical trials, and there are avenues to do that through the Michael J. Fox Foundation and 23andMe, both for patients as well as normal volunteers, because one of the important things when you're looking at genetic samples and you're looking for a certain condition is you have to be able to compare it with normal volunteers and see what genes are different in patients that don't have, or people that don't have Parkinson's versus people that do. So I think those statistics, although we always quote them that in young onset it's a much higher percentage, in later stage it's lower, I think that's going to change. I think those statistics are going to continue to evolve.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. I know that the conversation changes pretty regularly around the research, and hearing that there are over 200 clinical trials going on currently is quite amazing and quite hopeful. Dan, let me turn back to you. We have about 15 minutes left. What advice would you give to someone who's newly diagnosed with Parkinson's?
Oh, me. I think the thing that would be the most important is to get up to speed educationally as fast as you can. The second part of that is pick your exercise. I have been boxing for 4.5 years, and I think that makes all the difference in the world. But pick your exercise and get after it. Don't wait till you get to have severe symptoms, because at the first part of the disease, you'll have mild symptoms. That's when you need to be exercising. Not waiting till you get in where you have profound symptoms and hoping that exercise will pull you out of it. So education first, you'll be glad to hear that, education. And then secondly, pick your exercise. Find an exercise you really like. Like Dr. Peckham said, if you could go to a place or I'm not sure, maybe Lauren said that, if you go to a place and don't like the exercise, don't do that. Yeah. I didn't, I like boxing. I like hitting something. I still do. But it gives me great relief, as well as probably helps my anxiety. But find out what you like to do and then do a lot of it regularly. I think that'd be the best advice I could give. Okay.
I have another question about DBS. So maybe you and Dr. Peckham can respond to this. How exactly does it work? We noticed a dramatic difference when you turned your DBS off and then turned it back on. But what's the science or the physics of that? How does it work?
I can start on that. You're pointing to me. So the short answer is that nobody really knows. There is several neurotransmitters that are depleted with Parkinson's, and we think that it basically short circuits the direct and indirect pathways of motor movement, but nobody really knows. It was discovered by accident. We know that it works. And we know that it works well for certain symptoms in Parkinson's. So the things that it helps primarily are tremor, slowness, and stiffness. It can actually make balance worse. It can make speech worse. And it can potentially make cognitive issues worse. So there's certain things that we know it really helps a lot, and other things that you just have to watch.
Yeah. Question for Lauren, and Nina touched on this a little bit, but how have your classes been adapted during the COVID-19 quarantine? Can you say more about what impact that's had on participants? Have you, what kinds of workarounds have you found? What have you done?
Well, I'll start, Nina. The live streaming has been a blessing. I mean, we started live streaming actually early. We intended on live streaming our classes anyway, so we were heading in that direction. So we kind of jumped in early and got a lot of the kinks out. We're, aside from just being able to reach our local participants, we've been able to expand our participants throughout the country. But I think because we do open our chat line, if you will, 30 minutes earlier, so we've trying to keep people connected, and so people can come in and say hi. It's Charlie, and somebody else can say hi. How you doing? How's it going? Have you been to the doctor? Or how are you getting your groceries or whatever? So we're trying to keep lines open besides just exercising, and we are starting some Zoom classes, so there'll be a lot more interaction. But we have 6 classes a week, so there's plenty to choose from, and we keep them up for 2 weeks, so you can go back and do them over and over again. So there's actually more online now than there was in person.
Yeah, we've talked a lot in higher education about how this pandemic has really forced us to learn some new things pretty quickly, and while there's been some clunkiness, it's actually given us new resources for beyond when this pandemic ends, which is a good thing. Vanessa and Andre, let's swing back to you just for another couple of minutes. You've touched on this, but maybe just reflect on it one more time. What do you hope the lasting impact of this film will be?
Vanessa, let's start with you.
Live forever out in the streaming world. So, what do you hope the impact will be?
All right, Andre. So obviously the information is changing. Every year more studies are done and more drugs are being studied. So this won't, who knows in 10 years where this film will be and how accurate it'll still be. But I think we just want to give people hope that like what everyone's been saying, this is not a death sentence. You don't die from this. And there's a lot happening right now. I think, Alan, you said at some point during production, there's never been a better time to have Parkinson's, because there's so much, there's so many breakthroughs happening, and there's a lot of support. Michael J. Fox Foundation, for one, I mean, what a godsend. And so I think the takeaway is really to hope that this can give people information they might not have had from other sources.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with that. Information and hope, I think are like the key takeaways. And I still think that it's a story about people that have Parkinson's, and they are taking an active role in their lives. So no matter what part, like when in history it happens, and again, in the future, we can only assume, and hopefully so, that there will be more resources, more technology, more understanding, more drugs or therapies, whatever it might be, to either completely make it go away or at least continue to improve the quality of life. It's like Dan said before, like, to have this in the 70s versus in present day, there's so much more information available and resources and treatments. So if the film over time still serves as a beacon for people to say, oh, taking an active role in understanding all the information, again, like Dan said, it sort of mirrors the question that you asked Dan, which is, if you just found this out, what would you do? And I believe Dan was just like, oh, well, I think that getting as much information as possible and educating yourself. So I would hope that this over time, like, has some level of, education and inspiration as a resource for people.
Yeah, well said. Nina, I'm going to ask you to tell us how we can support Power for Parkinson's.
Well, thanks, Alan. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everybody, Vanessa and Andre, for putting this incredible film together. I mean, it's just done so much to raise awareness about Parkinson's in general and just how much hope there is for people with Parkinson's. And, as far as supporting Power for Parkinson's, now that we are local, we do touch the lives of so many people, probably 300 people in Austin when we are in person, and then now just so many around the world. But all of that, of course, we're a nonprofit, and that takes a lot of resources to get all of this off the ground. So, donating to our organization is a tremendous help. When we do get back in class, we'll be having many volunteer opportunities again. And so we would love to get people involved and just spreading the word and letting people know there's hope out there. There's a lot of resources and a lot of ways for people to stay actively engaged and to feel happy and be connected.
Yeah, the community piece I think is really important. I want to just underscore that one more time before we come to an end. The exercise is essential, but because Parkinson's can be so isolating, both for those who have it, but also care partners, those who provide support for people with Parkinson's. And, my experience, PFP is not only attending to the physical needs, but also the needs for relationship and the needs for community. And I know people really look forward to being a part of that community. And as Dan said, with his boxing community, they're missed if they aren't there for a period of time, and people sort of check in on you. And so I think it's really important that we underscore that piece too. No chronic illness happens in isolation. Ideally, you want people around you and people like you who can relate to your experience and who can be beacons of hope for you if maybe you're earlier on the road in that disease. In my case, people like Dan and others whom I've come to know through our work with PFP and other organizations has given me that hope. So if you'd like to support PFP, I want to invite you to go to their website. You can Google Power for Parkinson's, and there's a donate button right on the landing page. We'd be grateful for your support. And as Nina said, once we get back to the new normal post COVID-19, there will be many opportunities for volunteering. So we're about out of time. I want to thank a wonderful panel. Andre and Vanessa, thank you for your vision and for your craft and for putting this beautiful, lasting film together that we will continue to benefit from and enjoy. Dan, thank you for being such an inspiration. Dr. Peckham, thank you for taking care of Dan and me and so many other people who are on this road. Lauren and Nina, thank you for what you do. Even if it's painful sometimes, Lauren, I know you have our best interests in mind. And, as I've said to many people, the people you meet when you have Parkinson's are unmatched. And I count all of you as among those people for me. Thank you for doing all this work. The work continues. We need people to be a part of this work, and we invite all of you to consider ways that you might do that. I hope you'll take care, be safe, wear masks, social distance. Let's get through this thing. Thank you. Take care.